So this is a question about collaboration versus consolidation. And the question is, it seems that consolidation will be the driving force rather than just basic collaboration. Any thoughts from the panelists?
I think that collaboration versus consolidation, there's a lot of emotion and feelings that come when you gather individuals to talk about consolidating, unless they are in a very critical point in the stage of that organization. And even then, I've seen organizations who just, I think the best, the only way sometimes groups would even consider consolidating is when a neutral party brings it up to both of them, or a few of the organizations. I have been in situations where things have gotten pretty ugly, where relationships with organizations have really became fragile as a result of some of these discussions when there isn't a neutral party bringing folks together. I think that I would just say you trend on those very carefully if you even approach someone, if you're the one thinking of consolidating with somebody else, without having somebody neutral be a part of that, sort of a mediator. No, I've seen some really great consolidations. I should say, I have seen some really great consolidations that have taken place. I think one example is Pillars out in the western suburbs. They've consolidated from a for-profit to a nonprofit that really brought in some really great aspect to strengthen the organization called Pillars. And so I would, it can happen really well.
Well, I guess I'll challenge the frame of the question. Why should we consolidate? You know, Bank of America bought Wachovia, I mean, we bailed them out for trillions. They're making billions they're sitting on their profits, but the credit isn't going in our communities. They're making millions on bonuses. They're not consolidating jack shit, pardon my French. But they bought the lawmakers. You know, they bought the regulators. You know, we're paying their freight. So, you know, I think we have an entirely crazy skewed conversation. America is not broke, in my opinion. Illinois is not broke. There's plenty of money here. It's just not going to the place it should go. And where it goes is a function of policy and law. Yes? You know, tell me it's not so. And, you know, these things reflect the values of the people who get to the polls. So, you know, maybe you say it's cyclical. You know, we had the Great Depression, and we had Roosevelt, and we had Reagan. You know, you have to be intentional. That's all I'm saying. Don't take anything for granted.
All right, next question. There has been recent scrutiny of public-private nonprofits such as World Business Chicago regarding structural conflicts of interest. Are public-private hybrids a net plus for society in the nonprofit community, or is the which master do they serve cooked into the organizational structure? I think it's a great question.
I'll jump in on that one too. I mean, I spent a lot of my civic life fighting privatization. Some of you may know that I was one of the organizers of something called No Games Chicago. So let's hear a shout out for anybody who wanted the Olympics to come here. No? Well, the city of Toronto, city of Vancouver is up $1.5 billion in the hole because of their games. The city of London's games are $12 billion behind budget. We were right about that fight. But that was a fight about would have privatized the entire city to be a vassal of a Swiss corporation for 7 years. So you hear a lot of these things called public-private partnerships. To me, you have to use the word privatization, and you have to ask yourself this question: what is government for? Is it for to transfer the wealth of the many into the hands of the few, which it seems to me what is happening? Or is it to look out for people and to give opportunities and to be generous and to have an open heart, which is what I think you guys are about? The folks who have their hands on the control of government now is about the first thing. It's about government should be like a business. Screw that. The businesses have burned their own houses down. How's that working for the planet, right? You know, Goldman Sachs and Enron and Now, Olympus, this famous company in Japan, committed fraud for decades. These guys are not the right models. I would say the nonprofit spirit should how we'd be running things. So I'm very, very cautious. I'm very suspicious, especially in this jurisdiction where they already sold you out so many times. Look at your parking meters.
Well, I have to take a counterpoint point of view here. I think public-private partnerships and public nonprofit partnerships and private nonprofit partnerships can be good things, where you're very clear about what the goals and objectives are, and there is transparency. Lots of stuff happens when there isn't transparency. So if you're clear about the goals and it's useful resources for your nonprofit and you're transparent about what you're doing, I think it can be a real boon.
We have a lot of questions that are for individual presenters, and I think maybe what I will do is ask people who've had those questions to maybe approach the panelists individually during the reception to have those questions answered. I just have a question for Tom. Your message about Get Political is really sort of resonating with me, and I guess the question is, I think a lot of nonprofits struggle with the day-to-day sort of managing the work of the organization and keeping up with what needs to be done. And balancing that against the sort of future interests of the organization and more systemic change. How do organizations make time or room for that in their work?
Yeah, I started organizing in the nonprofit community in 1990. It was the same question. I don't have time. I don't have time. I'm not permitted to do that. First of all, there's a lot of misconceptions about what people can and can't do. So let me be clear. I'm not saying that your nonprofit organization should endorse candidates. That's clearly against the law. I'm saying you, as nonprofit leaders, after 5 o'clock, or really after 10 o'clock, which is probably when you'll leave your office, that's when you should get involved in civic life and do what these other groups are doing. They find people who reflect their values, and they either train them or recruit them to run for office, or you run yourself. So I ran for office last year. It was a crazy thing. I raised like $10,000, but I got 53,000 people to vote for me, in a countywide race. The winner got 940,000 votes. But someone said to me, you haven't really done democracy until you've lost an election. So come on, guys. This is not for this should be democracy is a full contact participatory sport. It's not like FedEx where they bring it to you, or the automat. You got to get off your butts and go out there and do that. Now, so to your question, you got to make the time. The other side has made the time. The people who have their hands on the steering wheel have made the time. The great old organizer Saul Alinsky said there's two kinds of power, organized money and organized people. So what do we got?
All right, thanks. I want to keep us running on time, so I'm going to turn it over to Kate to let her make some closing comments.
I'd like to thank all of our panelists for very stimulating presentations.